Hello and welcome to North Star Oasis. I'm your host Jeff Williams. We're here for another jam-packed action-filled information overload. I'm not going to be speaking a whole lot today because I am getting over a head cold and it has been impacting my throat. So we do have a lot of stuff to cover, and I think we've got like 20 different clips that we're going to be showing you today. So hold on to your hats, folks. We've had a really busy week in politics. So we're going to start off going with our Prager University segment, America Wants Legal Immigrants.
I am the proud son of immigrants from Bangladesh. I was raised in New York City, which has benefited enormously from the energy and ambition of the millions of people born abroad who've chosen to make it their home. But I also believe that America's immigration system needs to work for America. And right now, that is simply not the case. We need a new immigration system. So what should it be? We're often presented with two stark choices: severe restrictions or open borders. I think there's a better way. But before I offer a solution, let's look at the usual suspects. The case for open borders is, on the surface, pretty attractive. Tens of millions of people around the world would be grateful to come to America for the chance to live in peace and earn a decent living. The vast majority of them mean us no harm. Why not give them a chance to share in the blessings of liberty? The simple answer is that our country is more than just a marketplace. We're a democracy based on a social contract. Americans pay taxes so that, among other things, the poorest, most unlucky among us can still lead decent and dignified lives. If you can't work, you might be eligible for unemployment benefits or disability. If you do work, but your paycheck doesn't go far enough for you to afford medical care or food for your kids, we have a safety net designed to help you stay afloat. Liberals and conservatives disagree on how extensive this safety net ought to be, but they all agree it needs to be there. The question is, how far are we willing to stretch it? A century ago, immigrants who found they couldn't make it in America had little choice but to go back home. That is no longer the case. These days, immigrants who can't earn enough to support their families have access to many government benefits. That doesn't make them bad people. In an age of offshoring and automation, wages for menial jobs don't go very far. If we only admitted a modest number of low-skill immigrants, say as political refugees, we could easily handle it. But over the past 40 years, we have allowed millions of low-skill immigrants into the country, both legally and illegally. While highly educated immigrants pay far more in taxes than they consume in benefits, the opposite is true of immigrants with less than a high school diploma. Immigrant engineers working for Google, Amazon, and Apple do just fine without government help. The immigrant janitors and busboys who serve them struggle to afford housing and to give their kids a decent start in life. Without government aid, many would go hungry. If we were to open our borders, the number of low-skilled immigrants would skyrocket, and so too would the cost of meeting their needs. Ironically, this would only exacerbate the wealth disparity that so animates the open borders crowd. Maybe the rich could wall themselves off in gated communities, but the growing ranks of the poor and even the middle class would have to deal with ever more strained social services. That could provoke resentment strong enough to set off real class warfare. If open borders are a bad idea, so too is severely restricting immigration. For one, immigration has always been part of the American story, and it continues to be an essential source of talent, from Silicon Valley to medicine to pro sports. Why shut ourselves off from the dynamism and energy that immigrants can bring? Thankfully, there is a way to fix this problem. We can modernize the system to give priority to those who have strong skills and job offers. People, in other words, who will pay more in taxes than they need in benefits. Today, we admit about 2/3 of immigrants on the basis of family ties and only 15% on the basis of skills. We need a course correction. We should limit family immigration to immediate family members, such as spouses and minor children, while greatly expanding the number of skills-based visas. A skills-based point system would be a huge boon for people around the world looking to live the American dream. It would give them a predictable, step-by-step guide for how to better their chances at a green card. Just as importantly, by prioritizing immigrants with strong skills, we'd make the safety net much easier to sustain for those with low skills whom we'd still admit, albeit at a more modest level. Let's announce to the world that if you're ambitious, if you have skills we prize, the golden door is open. If you can support yourself and your family and add to our economy, we want you. If we aspire to an immigration system that works, this is the most realistic and idealistic choice. I'm Raihan Salam, executive editor of National Review.
And in order to really do that, you would have to go back and repeal the Immigration Act of 1965 and subsequent amendments to that. It's something I don't think that we've got the political will to do, even though I think we should. The immigration system, yes, is broken. It needs fixing. It's not just the border. This is something that Republicans and Democrats both agree on. I've had conversations with both Republicans and Democrats about this, and they all say the same thing. The immigration system is flawed. We need to fix it. Yes, we need to fix it. Now, I forgot to mention, it is February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. So with that, now we're going to get back to our regular programming. We're going to start off and keep the America Wants legal immigrants in the back of your mind when you go through at least two-thirds of the show today, because we're going to bring you up to date on events from the past week. Now, when we ended the show last week, we were getting ready to show you highlights from President Trump's State of the Union address. And then we just ran out of time. So we're going to lead with that today. And so just to kind of get you back into familiarity with what we played last week, Dallas, go ahead and play the next three in sequence. Don't worry about coming back to me. We're going to show President Trump welcoming Apollo 11 astronaut Buzz Aldrin to the State of the Union address. And he also honors D-Day veterans at the State of the Union address. And then we're going to have some highlights from the State of the Union. So go ahead and play these next three in sequence just to get last week's programming out of the way from the State of the Union.
In 2019, we also celebrate 50 years since brave young pilots flew 250,000 miles through space to plant the American flag on the face of the moon. Half a century later, we are joined by one of the Apollo 11 astronauts who planted that flag, Buzz Aldrin. Thank you, Buzz. This year, American astronauts will go back to space on American rockets. This year, America will recognize two important anniversaries that show us the majesty of America's mission and the power of American pride. In June, we mark 75 years since the start of what General Dwight D. Eisenhower called the Great Crusade, the Allied liberation of Europe in World War II. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, 15,000 young American men jumped from the sky, and 60,000 more stormed in from the sea to save our civilization from tyranny. Here with us tonight are three of those incredible heroes. Private First Class Joseph Riley, Staff Sergeant Irving Locker, and Sergeant Herman Zaitchik. Please. Gentlemen, we salute you. Members of Congress, the state of our union is strong. That sounds so good. An economic miracle is taking place in the United States, and the only thing that can stop it are foolish wars, politics, or ridiculous partisan investigations. If there is going to be peace and legislation, there cannot be war and investigation. It just doesn't work that way. No one has benefited more from a thriving economy than women, who have filled 58% of the newly created jobs last year. You weren't supposed to do that. Thank you very much. Large, organized caravans are on the march to the United States. I have ordered another 3,750 troops to our southern border to prepare for this tremendous onslaught. This is a moral issue. In the past, most of the people in this room voted for a wall, but the proper wall never got built. I will get it built. We are now making it clear to China that after years of targeting our industries and stealing our intellectual property, the theft of American jobs and wealth has come to an end. Tonight, we are also joined by Pittsburgh survivor Judah Samet. He arrived at the synagogue as the massacre began. But not only did Judah narrowly escape death last fall, more than 7 decades ago, he narrowly survived the Nazi concentration camps. Today is Judah's 81st birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
They wouldn't do that for me, Judah. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
Now, can you imagine having your birthday party at the State of the Union address and having all members of Congress and both parties wish you a happy birthday, sing happy birthday for you? That was incredible. It really, really was. But that was a wrap-up, just some key highlights from President Trump's State of the Union address. Now, this, of course, came, it was a delayed State of the Union address because of the government shutdown and all the political posturing between Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump. We covered some of that on previous episodes of the show. So now we're going to take a look at what happened in this last week, because if you remember, the shutdown ended with a 3-week window that ends tomorrow. Yes, if the budget wasn't agreed to by Friday, the 15th of February, then the government would shut down again coming up on Saturday, the 16th of February. So a lot of maneuvering happened this last week. So we're going to start off with Vice President Mike Pence, who was talking about drugs and the war on drugs that are being imported from the cartels in Mexico. So here is the Vice President.
President Trump has made the fight against illegal drugs a top priority of this administration. You heard his commitment to that mission just 2 days ago. In a State of the Union address, as the President told the nation that we are committed to put drug dealers out of business and truly make America safe. Nowhere is the crisis of illegal drug trafficking more evident or our challenge more profound than at our nation's southern border. And you know firsthand how serious this crisis is, because the southwest border high-intensity drug trafficking area is among the most active in this entire program. Last year, Customs and Border Protection seized more than 827,000 pounds of illegal drugs entering our country at our southern border. And that's just the drugs that they found. Just last week, Director Carroll unveiled our administration's National Drug Control Strategy. He described it aptly as a strategy of action, and so it is. That strategy lays out our comprehensive plan to combat illegal drug use and drug smuggling, and the high-intensity drug trafficking area program is essential to our efforts. We believe in combining the capabilities of the federal government and the expertise of local law enforcement. It's a powerful combination, and you can be confident of our continued support. We'll also make new and renewed investments in law enforcement at every level, as President Trump renewed his call for Congress to enact stronger drug protection at our ports, and when it comes to the southern border. As Congress is involved in negotiations even at this very hour, let me assure you, we will not rest or relent until we have the technology, the personnel, and the barriers required to secure our southern border. We will build that wall one way or another.
We have a
That was on Thursday. Actually, that was when we were taping last week's episode. So, excuse me. On Friday, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy came out and he made a statement regarding the negotiations on the border wall funding.
A challenge right now as to our appropriation bills going forward. I'm hopeful we'll come to a conclusion. We need to this weekend so we can vote next week. Talking to a number of Democrats individually, it's amazing of how many of them say, I'd like to solve the border security and I'm for providing more money for barriers. Unfortunately, their leadership seems to keep saying no. So this weekend will tell us a lot about where we're going, but I'm hopeful next week we can get this all solved and continue to move forward on our next challenges. I can't say what the president will and will not do, but in my conversation with the president, I know he wants us to find a legislative solution. He wants us to work on this, and I have heard some positive talk. I just have not seen the actions on the Democrat side. They will talk about more money for a barrier, but then they want to put more restrictions not to be able to use that. I think that's more of a challenge of going forward. But I do believe at the end of the day that we'll all be in the same place. We know at the end of the day we want the president to be able to sign this, so we will work together to make sure whatever we bring out there that the president would be supporting it.
Over the week. So I'll tell you this real briefly. One thing that President Trump is doing right. He actually learned from Barack Obama. What Barack Obama did when he went for the passage of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, was he slammed it down everybody's throats without negotiating with Republicans in good faith. Which means that when the ACA was passed, there was not a single Republican vote in the House, not a single Republican vote in the Senate, and when it didn't work, Obama owned it and the Democrats owned it. And President Trump, to his credit, is trying to actually get a legislative proposal that both sides can agree on. He's when the government reopened, he had shown a willingness to compromise, that he wants bipartisan support to include funding for a border wall. He does not want to make the same mistakes that Barack Obama did. I think if Obama were to do it again, what he should have done, and this is what I said at the time, was that he should have actually met the Republicans part way. But Barack Obama didn't do that. It was his way or the highway. So Republicans told him to go down the highway, and then Democrats ended up losing a bunch of seats in the U.S. House, the U.S. Senate, and in state legislatures and governor's offices across the country. That was Barack Obama's legacy. Trump is trying not to do it that way if he can avoid it. So he's giving Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi every opportunity to come up with funding for the wall. That's why we had this 3-week period. That's why he didn't continue with the government shutdown. He wants a legislative fix. So over the weekend, both sides are negotiating. House Republicans, House Democrats, Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats, the White House. When I say both sides, really Republicans and Democrats all negotiating. And what happened? Well, here is Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell on Monday to tell us what happened over the weekend.
Over the weekend, we heard that the talks had suddenly hit a snag. The bipartisan momentum had stalled. What went wrong? What went wrong? Well, Mr. President, here's what happened. House Democrats decided to add a poison pill demand into the conversations at the 11th hour. It's a new demand. It's really extreme. A hard statutory cap on the number of illegal immigrants who could be detained by the federal government. A hard statutory cap on how many illegal immigrants could be detained by the federal government. Some House Democrats are risking a second partial government shutdown by calling for this absurd last-minute poison pill. No administration of any party would sign a bill that forced them to release criminal aliens into the interior of the United States. No administration would accept this poison pill forcing the release of criminals now and on a rolling basis going forward. I understand the 4 leaders on appropriations in both chambers will be meeting in just a few minutes. I would implore my friends across the aisle, untangle yourselves from the most extreme far-left voices out on the fringe. Do not let this radical fringe and its absurd demand prevent you from taking yes for an answer.
So that was on Monday. So on Tuesday, President Trump went down to El Paso, Texas. Now, the next couple of clips are really taken out of sequence, and that was my fault. But we're just going to keep it with the sequence I originally had. This is his rally on Tuesday night in El Paso. But then after that, a couple of things happened during the day, so we'll get back to that. So let's take a look at what President Trump said at his El Paso rally on Tuesday night.
This weekend, some Democrats even proposed a measure that would force the release of thousands of criminal illegal aliens, including dangerous felons convicted of rape, sex trafficking, violent assault, and even murder into our country. Can you believe this? Now, I have to tell you, as I was walking up to the stage, they said that progress is being made with this committee. Just so you know, we're building the wall anyway. They say that progress has been made with this committee. Just now, I said, wait a minute, I got to take care of my people from Texas. I got to go. I don't even want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about it. So I don't know what they mean. Progress is being made significant. Now, what did happen is the Democrats were being hit really hard on the concept of releasing criminals into our society. That has not been playing well. So maybe progress has been made, maybe not. But I had a choice. I could have stayed out there and listened, or I could have come out to the people of El Paso and Texas. I chose you. And there's no place better to talk about border security, whether they like it or not, because I've been hearing a lot of things. Oh, the wall didn't make that much of a difference. You know where it made a big difference? Right here in El Paso. You're talking a few feet away, right? A few feet. Got a wall. It's a few feet away. Last year, Juarez had 1,200 murders. El Paso, right next door, a few feet away, had 23 murders. That's not good either. But 23 compared to 1,200. Walls work.
Now, earlier in the day, as the president had alluded to, that the House and Senate Republicans and Democrats have pretty much formed a consensus agreement. They came to a decision. They brought in the White House on this. So the first thing we're going to show now is President Trump. And by the way, if you notice the lack of Democrat voices in these clips, that is not selective editing. That is, we're using what the Associated Press has, on their channel. The fact is, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi did not get covered by the Associated Press. That's where our material is coming from today. So if you're wondering why this is so Republican heavy, blame the Associated Press. Don't blame us, because if Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi would have made statements during this last week that the AP covered, we would be actually including their statements in. And I do know that not this one, but the next clip, we do have a little bit with New York Senator Chuck Schumer. But before we get there, we're going to hear what President Trump has to say about his initial reaction to what he had seen with the beginning of the border deal.
As I'm going on stage to speak, they're telling me about the committee came out with a deal. And, they went over it very briefly. Then I went over it briefly last night, but it was 3 o'clock in the morning. And I can't say I'm happy. I can't say I'm thrilled. But the wall's getting built, regardless. Doesn't matter, because we're doing other things beyond what we're talking about here. So we'll see what happens. We're having a meeting on it later. It's really obstruction. The Democrats want everybody to be able to come into our country. I can tell you that, am I happy at first glance? I just got to see it. The answer is no, I'm not. I'm not happy. But am I happy with where we're going? I'm thrilled, because we're supplementing things and moving things around, and we're doing things that are fantastic and taking from far less important areas. And the bottom line is we're building a lot of wall. Right now we're building a lot of wall. And you think it's easy? We're building in the face of tremendous obstruction and tremendous opposition from a small group of people. Now, one thing that happened that was, I think, very revealing, we had the biggest and best border agents and experts come up and see the committee. And they said, more than anything else, you need a barrier, you need a wall. And the recommendation was unacceptable to the committee. So that tells you more than anything else.
You want to go through another shutdown?
I don't think you're going to see a shutdown. I wouldn't want to go to it now. If you did have it, it's a Democrat's fault. And I accepted the first one, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished, because people learned during that shutdown all about the problems coming in from the southern border. I've always accepted it. But this one, I would never accept if it happens, but I don't think it's going to happen. But this would be totally on the Democrats.
So now, what do congressional leaders have to say when it came to, and this is also on Tuesday, what did congressional leaders have to say regarding the compromise that they had reached for the budget negotiation and the border deal? Well, let's find out.
I think he's got a pretty good deal here, you know. The Speaker said there wouldn't be a dollar for a wall. Well, I guess we're going to have an argument now about what's a wall, but barriers. And that they wanted a cap on detention apprehension. So, I think he's done just fine. I hope he'll conclude that because he's got to sign the bill. As Chairman Shelby pointed out, they've reached an agreement. They now have to put it on paper. We have to see if that reflects the principles, and we're hopeful the President will, once he does that and once we do that, will conclude that it's a good idea to sign it.
Now, we have a bipartisan agreement. As in all bipartisan agreements, everybody had to give something. We are urging the President to sign it. The President should not make the same mistake he made a couple of months ago when there was a bipartisan agreement and he wouldn't sign it and cause the shutdown. Please, Mr. President, no one got everything they wanted in this bill, but sign it and don't cause a shutdown. The leaders of the conference committee have found an agreement in principle to keep the government open. The details are still being hammered out, but the tentative agreement represents a welcome path forward for our country and away from the dreaded government shutdown.
So that was again on Tuesday, so then it took until Wednesday night. So last night, because today's Thursday afternoon, late last night they actually had the actual draft finished. So yesterday, President Trump made another statement about the wall.
As we review the new proposal from Congress, I can promise you this: I will never waver from my sacred duty to defend this nation and its people. We will get the job done. The wall is very, very on its way. It's happening as we speak. We're building as we speak in the most desperately needed areas. And it's a big wall. It's a strong wall. It's a wall that people aren't going through very easy. They're going to have to be in extremely good shape to get over this one. They would be able to climb Mount Everest a lot easier, I think. But it's happening. And we have other things happening, too. We're strengthening up the ports of entry. We're using tremendous technology, including drones, but tremendous technology. But it all hinges around the walls, because you don't have the walls, the technology is almost useless.
So that was yesterday. Now, here we are, the big day, Valentine's Day. Did I ever say Happy Valentine's Day? I think I did that earlier in the show. Anyhow, when Congress went into session today, the first thing that they did was prayed. Here we go.
May your peace fill the lives of each senator and those they serve until you come again to claim your kingdom. We pray in the most holy name of Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen.
Let's all pray that the President will have wisdom to sign the bill so the government doesn't shut down. Join me in pledge.
I doubt if you can complete 55 miles of wall between now and September the 30th. So the money's there for that. They'll start this process going. So I think since they can't do any more than 55 miles between now and October 1st, that's my prayer that the President sees that and that he will sign the bill, because we don't want to shut down for government. I also would hope, just like we have 80 new members of Congress that have never been through a shutdown before being elected. Now they've been through it, as I was through it. The President had never been in politics before. I'm sure he never really dealt with a government shutdown. I hope we all learn from these experiences.
Senator Shelby's okay with it. I'm sure I'll be okay with it. I think the president's in a good spot. It depends on how they write the language, but he's certainly inclined to sign it and move forward.
Are you encouraging him to do that?
Yeah, if it does not limit bed space, and apparently it does not, because there's some money you can reprogram, and if you can actually use the money to put up barriers where it makes sense, I think I'm good to go. There's some money for judges. There's some things in there that are good for border security, and let him march toward filling in the gaps by executive action.
And that is what happened today. And an update. The update occurred actually just before we started taping. So the Senate overwhelmingly passed the massive budget and border security deal Thursday after the president committed to signing legislation. So he did say he would sign legislation. $333 billion passed 83-16, and it expected to pass the House later on today in time to avert a government shutdown slated to start on Saturday. And then moments before we started taping, Senator Mitch McConnell took to the floor of the Senate and had this to say.
Mr. President.
Leader McConnell.
I've just had an opportunity to speak with President Trump, and he, I would say to all my colleagues, has indicated he's prepared to sign the bill. He will also be issuing a national emergency declaration at the same time. And I've indicated to him that I'm going to support the national emergency declaration. So for all of my colleagues, the President will sign the bill. We'll be voting on it shortly. And with that, I ask the Chair to lay before the Senate the conference report to accompany House Joint Resolution 31.
Of course, that was the speech given just before the vote, but by the time we got the video feed in, that actually the vote had already occurred by the time we had seen the video. Nonetheless, the Senate has passed the budget deal. The House will probably pass the budget deal. The President has announced that he will sign the budget deal, which means we will not have a budget shutdown anytime between now and the 30th of September. This does provide some wall money. I'm trying to find it here. And as the compromise, as Chuck Grassley pointed out, provides $1.375 billion for 55 new miles of fences, 55 miles of new fences along the border in Texas, far short of the $5.7 billion that the president had asked for. He wanted 234 miles of steel walls. And so now, the one thing Trump did signal was that he can declare a state of emergency. If he declares a state of emergency, he will be able to maneuver money from other budgets into securing more miles for the walls and barriers. Whether he does, how he does that, whether he does that, that remains to be seen. But we've all known for a long time that President Trump said he's going to build a wall. This is a guy who is a New York real estate developer. He is used to building things. Who else would you rather trust to build a wall? A developer? I didn't think so. But that's the thing that the Democrats knew. They knew. They couldn't stop. Trump is going to get his wall. So since I'm just terrible with math today, 234 minus 55. So if 55 more miles will be constructed, that means we have 179 more miles to go in order to get to where Trump wanted. So at 1.375, well, okay, 1.375. Okay, divided by 55. So we're dealing with $25 million per mile times 179. So we are $4.475 billion shy. So we're going to see this brought up 1st of October. I want more wall money. We'll see how much money that President Trump can find from other budget sources to allocate towards that $4.475 billion shortfall for the 234 miles of construction. It's going to get built. This is, you know, Trump's given the Democrats every opportunity to come along and work for an acceptable agreement. He's not playing the game like Barack Obama did, as we discussed earlier. But at the same time, he's still going to be resolute. He promised the people he was going to build a wall. He is going to build a wall. That's it. There are only, excuse me, there are only a handful of things that President Trump is really, really passionate about. He'll compromise everything else away. Trade deals. The economy, that's number one. The border wall, that's number two. And really, if you listen to everything else that Trump says, and going all the way, getting us out of the Middle East and wars, that's number three. If you listen to everything he said really for the last 30 to 40 years, it really comes back to those three things. We're getting hosed in a trade war with Japan or China. It was Japan back in the 80s. It's China now. So he's taking care of business with the EU and with China and with Mexico on the trade deals. So that's the first thing. Two, we need to build a border wall. We need to stem the tide of illegal immigration that's coming across the borders. He's been saying this for 30 years. That's number two. And then he didn't feel that we did the right thing in going into Iraq and in other places along the Middle East, and that we haven't done anything with North Korea and other hot spots that we've ignored for decades. He said that for many, many, many decades. That's number three. The smaller details outside of those three, Health and Human Services budget, education department, a lot of that stuff he doesn't care about. That's not a big priority for him. He'll compromise any of that stuff away, but he will fight for the big three that I just discussed. That's the way the president is. That's the way he's always been. He is 72 years old and is not going to change. And I hope that people can start to understand that. But anyhow, right now we seem to have averted another budget shutdown, our government shutdown, and we're going to have a national emergency, and more construction for the wall is going to be going on, and the issue is still going to continue to fester its head because we don't have the entire 234 miles of wall. So we'll be revisiting this in the fall.
And the court bail for the executive order could go until...
Oh, and then I'm sure at the same time, as soon as that the president reallocates money from other budgets into wall construction, that the Democrats are going to go over to their friends in the Ninth Circuit, and they'll file the lawsuit, and by September, the Supreme Court will probably rule in favor of the president at the same time that he's getting ready for the next round of budget negotiations. That's the process. That's what's going on. It's nothing you and I can do to stop that. So that's why I'm explaining this to you more in detail. But it was important for us to look back at what has happened since the State of the Union address, going all the way up to what happened this afternoon. Because you don't really see this full narrative play out on 4, 5, 9, 11, or on CBS, ABC, NBC, Fox. You don't. Al Jazeera and RT may, but and North Star Oasis certainly does. But for most of the media that you get, you're not going to get this in-depth of a coverage. But that also brings us into something else that's happening that you're starting to get a little more chatter about. And that is Minnesota's 5th Congressional District Congresswoman, Ilhan Omar. Yes, she's been stepping in it. Let's take a look at the controversy over her tweets.
By now, you have likely heard about the controversy over tweets sent out this weekend by Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Tweets discussing Israel, AIPAC, a powerful lobbying group, and money. At issue is the issue of anti-Semitism. Some are calling the Congresswoman anti-Semitic. Some are saying, no, she isn't anti-Semitic, but her tweets traffic in anti-Semitic tropes. It began late Sunday afternoon when Congresswoman Ilhan Omar responded to a tweet from a journalist who was posting about Omar's criticism of Israel. Omar tweet responded to that man and said, "It's all about the Benjamins, baby." That's where this problem begins, as that statement plays into anti-Semitic tropes about Jewish people that have existed for decades, about controlling money and banks. But it's more problematic than just that tweet, because it comes years after Ilhan Omar stated in a tweet that Israel hypnotizes the world to carry out evil. That matters because using the word hypnotize is also anti-Semitic. Why? Barry Weiss, in an article for the New York Times, explains it this way. The language which Representative Omar used evokes the conspiracy theory of the Jew as the hypnotic conspirator, the duplicitous manipulator, the sinister puppeteer, and it's one with ancient roots and a bloody history. Okay, only Congresswoman Omar can tell us if she meant her tweets to be anti-Semitic or if she just tweeted things without any knowledge that those words were anti-Semitic. Take, for example, the All About the Benjamins tweet. She might have been quoting the old Puff Daddy song, completely oblivious that those words were deeply offensive. To find out, I asked the Congresswoman. She told me in a message she did not realize what she tweeted was an anti-Semitic trope, and she is deeply sorry. She went on to say publicly in a statement, "Anti-Semitism is real, and I am grateful for Jewish allies and colleagues who are educating me on the painful history of anti-Semitic tropes. My intention is never to offend my constituents or Jewish Americans as a whole. We have to always be willing to step back and think through criticism. This is why I unequivocally apologize."
You know, that's why she unequivocally apologizes, except I have a feeling that she was specifically told by the Speaker of the House that that's what she has to say. Because she actually retweeted something else that was just as bad shortly after her apology, within a few hours. So she's playing the political game. She's getting her hand slapped by the leadership the Democrat House leadership. And here is the reaction from other lawmakers on Capitol Hill in Washington.
You know that God says, "I will bless those who bless Israel. I'll curse those who curse Israel." I'm sticking with God on that one. I trust His promise in that regard. Comments that divide us, that put us into individual camps like that, are inappropriate. And you would think someone who's been here that long, and she's been here like what, a week, that she would know better, but she doesn't. This is not the first time she's made comments that got her in trouble with her own side, and they're deplorable.
That when Kevin McCarthy said that it was Bloomberg, it was Soros, it was Steyer, that caucus can't be chicken shit in the face of anti-Semitism either. In the face of anti-Semitism, we don't acknowledge party. In the face of any hate, any vitriol, we don't acknowledge party. Okay? So, seriously, you're not agents of the Republican Party. I don't take a cent from federal lobbyists. I don't take a cent from corporate.
Anti-Semitism has no...
Congressman Rose is absolutely correct. That it's not a Republican or Democrat deal. That this is something that should not be tolerated from either party. That anti-Semitism is wrong. It's hate. It's bad. It's evil. I'm going to use all of the left-wing terms because they call things hate, you know, all the hate-mongering and all that. And yet, why is it that Ilhan Omar seems to get a pass, from Minnesotans at least? By the way, January 27th, 1945, the Soviet Army entered Auschwitz and liberated more than 7,000 remaining prisoners who were mostly ill and dying. It is estimated that at minimum 1.3 million people were deported to Auschwitz between 1940 and 45. Of these, at least 1.1 million were murdered. That's the reason why we don't have anti-Semitic comments. And Omar really ought to be ashamed of herself, even though I know that she's not, even in the wake of the public apology. Now, what has President Trump had to say about Omar's apology? And mind you, the president has a son-in-law who is Jewish. His daughter converted over to Judaism, and he is the president who moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, fulfilling a policy that of like 5 different presidential administrations beforehand who said they were going to do that, but nobody ever did. So the president truly is a friend of Israel in this regard. What did he have to say about Omar's apology?
Anti-Semitism has no place in the United States Congress. And Congressman Omar is terrible, what she said. And I think she should either resign from Congress or she should certainly resign from the House Foreign Affairs Committee. What she said is so deep-seated in her heart that her lame apology, and that's what it was lame, and she didn't mean a word of it, was just not appropriate. I think she should resign from Congress, frankly. But at a minimum, she shouldn't be on committees, certainly that committee.
Okay, so there is the president's words. In the interest of time, we actually had one other clip we were going to show, but I'm going to leave it up to you to interpret the president's words however you want. Personally, I agree with him as far as resigning from the House Foreign Affairs Committee. I won't go so far as Congress. I don't think she represents Minnesota well. That's my own personal opinion. But I don't live in the 5th Congressional District, and I'm going to leave the 5th Congressional District politics to the 5th Congressional District constituents. I live in the 4th, same district that you live in. But now, you think that that's all bad. Here is an exchange that she had just yesterday with Elliot Abrams, who was the U.S. envoy to Venezuela, and we're going to play the full thing courtesy of C-SPAN.
Ms. Omar.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your testimonies. Mr. Adams, in 1991, you pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress regarding your involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, for which you were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
If I can respond to that.
It wasn't a question. That was not a question. I reserve the right to my time.
It is not right.
That was not a question.
Committee can attack
on February 8th,
who is not permitted to reply.
That was not a question. Thank you for your participation. On February 8th, 1982, you testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about U.S. policy in El Salvador. In that hearing, you dismissed as communist propaganda report about the massacre of El Mozote, in which more than 800 civilians, including children as young as 2 years old, were brutally murdered by U.S.-trained troops. During that massacre, some of those troops bragged about raping a 12-year-old girl before they killed them. Girls before they killed them. You later said that the U.S. policy in El Salvador was a fabulous achievement. Yes or no, do you still think so?
From the day that President Duarte was elected in a free election to this day, El Salvador has been a democracy. That's a fabulous achievement.
Yes or no, do you think that massacre was a fabulous achievement that happened under our watch?
That is a ridiculous question, and I
yes or no?
No.
I will take that as a yes.
I am not going to respond to that kind of personal attack, which is not a question.
Yes or no, would you support an armed faction within Venezuela that engages in war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide, if you believe they were serving U.S. interest, as you did in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua?
I am not going to respond to that question. I'm sorry. I don't think this entire line of questioning is meant to be real questions, and so I will not reply.
Whether under your watch, a genocide will take place, and you will look the other way because American interests were being upheld, is a fair question, because the American people want to know that anytime we engage a country, that we think about what our actions could be and how we believe our values are being furthered. That is my question. Will you make sure that human rights are not violated and that we uphold international and human rights?
I suppose there is a question in there, and the answer is that the entire thrust of American policy in Venezuela is to support the Venezuelan people's effort to restore democracy to their country. That's our policy.
I don't think anybody disputes that. The question I had for you is that does the interest of the United States include protecting human rights and include protecting people against genocide?
That is always the position of the United States.
Thank you. I yield back my time.
Well, new this morning, research.
There you have it, folks. That's your Minnesota 5th District Congresswoman. What does Elliott Abrams from 35 years ago have to do with anything, or have anything to do with Venezuela? It has absolutely nothing to do. This is more trickery coming from the Democratic Party. I'd like to know who wrote her questions, because it's pretty clear from somebody who's actually remembers when all of this is happening, that she clearly had to have somebody guiding her and teaching her and writing this stuff. I kind of like to know who set her up to this, because they're really giving her some bad advice. Anyhow, speaking of history, what we are going to do is show you the next two clips, just in the interest of time. First one is thanks to the late Paul Allen, the Microsoft or Apple fame. The World War II era aircraft carrier USS Hornet was found at the bottom of the ocean floor in the Solomon Islands. And then right after that, we're going to go to the U.S. Navy band with one voice. Go ahead and play.
Well, new this morning, researchers located the final resting place of USS Hornet 77 years after it sank to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. So you're looking at a sonar image there of the wreck. A research vessel found it late last month near the Solomon Islands. Those waters are more than 17,000 feet deep. The World War II carrier is best known for its role in the famous Doolittle raid and the Battle of Midway. And the Japanese Navy sunk the carrier back in 1942.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Navy and all Americans, we'd like to thank our wounded warriors from each of the armed services and their caregivers for defending America with pride. We'd now like to dedicate this next portion of our concert to you. This is the sound of one voice, one spirit, one voice, the sound of one who makes a choice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one.
For Dallas Pearson producer, I'm your host, Jeff Williams. You're watching North Star Oasis, reminding you there's 313 shopping days left until Christmas. Happy Valentine's Day. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Helping each other to make it through. This is the sound of